it's hard to summarize all the different ways that university sports has played a role in my career and my life after UBC. But I think, a couple things come to mind. First and foremost is that resiliency, like that period of time. I entered university as an 18-year-old. I graduated as a 23-year-old, and during that time, like, you learn that you can do tough things, right? And so as a student athlete, two examples came to mind. One time I had a midterm in my fifth year, and the midterm was at 6 p.m. on a Friday. We qualified for playoffs, and our game was at 6 p.m. on a Friday. And the prof for my commerce course said, I'm fine. You can play your game as long as you start this midterm in your coach's office before people get out of the midterm. So I had to, by 8 o'clock or 10 to 8, be writing this exam in the coach's office right after this playoff game. And in hindsight, thank goodness we won, because you had that positive energy going into that, and I ended up carrying that into the midterm. But in the moment, you just said, of course, like, this is the task. I'll play my basketball game. I'll focus on that, and then I will switch gears. I'll get the ice on my knees, ice on my ankles. I was in my fifth year then. I had to ice everything after the game, and I'll go sit down. I'll write this exam, and you don't question it. You just do it, and because that's what it's all about. And that same thing, my first year. So rewind to my first year, we lost to Regina in the Canada West finals, I think by 50 points. And in basketball, like, that's a lot, right? I think that might have been the only time ever we lost by that amount. And then 2 weeks later, we were playing them in the national final, and had to get back on that court after they gave us such a shellacking. And came back, and we all, were able to rally as a team, and ended up winning that game in the national final. And it was, so you kind of learn that whole process of resiliency. You can do tough things and get to that other side. And then the other one was, I think, leadership. Like I was lucky to play for a coach, Deb Huband. She's recently retired after 27 years of coaching the Thunderbirds, and is an exceptional coach, exceptional leader. But during that time, seeing the values-based leadership she took to directing that team, and how that framed, her decision-making, and how she directed traffic and led us through that principled approach, like, that absolutely impacted the way I approach, my work now, and my family, and friendships, and everything, and my key relationships. So I think those two are things that really pop to mind.
And how important, like, do you think you would have, the second question is the importance of your student athlete experience and lessons learned. How important was it to go through that?
Yeah, I think extremely important. I think going through those, I share two stories, but there's countless examples of different moments that you get tested through being a student athlete, academically, physically with your sport, but also just that trial of, how do you balance it all, the time commitment, and also to performing at your best throughout that. I think absolutely.
I know I listened to an interview you did talking about how you ended up at your university. But talk a little bit about why the Canadian university was a great experience for you.
Yeah, and in the Canadian university, I think that being able to play in Canada, represent your school in Canada. Like, I grew up in North Vancouver, close to the Point Grey campus. I grew up going out and watching UBC games. My dad was a Thunderbird. He played for the football team out there. My mom graduated from UBC. So there was this connection to campus that I had growing up. And then to come and play sports here and compete for a Canadian national title, like there was no better feeling. So, and I think what I found at UBC was, it had that joint focus on, yes, you want to be exceptional on the court and do your best. But it's also they expect a lot from their athletes in the classroom as well, and you get challenged and tested, and being able to be at a school where that both are deeply valued was very important to me, and in hindsight, ended up being a great choice for me for my career as well.
I realize the next question is dicey because it says greatest, and that's like saying who is your greatest child. But when it comes to influence, you don't have to worry about the word greatest, but who has been a great influence or a couple of great influences on you?
Yeah, I definitely would say Deb. So I've mentioned Deb
Hmm.
already, and the way she conducted herself in that integrity, that approach, and she expected a lot of her for athletes, and she gave a lot. So I think Deb definitely had an influence on me. The other one would be when I think about basketball, my dad. From I was never an athlete that people would look at and say, wow, what an exceptional athlete, like in terms of my athleticism. And, uh, but I definitely I would someone that she'd say, man, she works really hard. And I
Mm.
think that concept of work ethic, and you really can do anything if you are willing to put in the time, put in the effort, reflect, get better, and work on being better. Like that was something that I learned from my dad. And whenever, growing up, if I had a bad game, it wasn't ever oh, bad game, let's go get an ice cream. It was like, okay, what went wrong? Because you don't ever have to have a bad game. Like it was,
Mm.
there's ways you can reflect and learn and position, get to the sense where you're on the other side of that for next time. So that whole concept, my dad played a big influence.
Wow. Again, same with the greatest. I don't want to ask you what your greatest accomplishment is because then it's trickier, but what's an accomplishment you're proud of or you feel is something that's great in your world?
In the context of sport, the three national championships I had at UBC, each was unique, and they've stuck with me for and they will stick with me forever. Those feelings that I had winning those championships, because I think with with sport in general, it's such a great feeling in team sports when you win with your 12 or 14 teammates standing right beside you, and look at all the work you guys have put in since your last game at the previous season, and where that gets you to as a group. That sense and that pride. Like after my last game as a Thunderbird, we had won our nationals in 2008, and that team, there was three of us that had been at UBC from the same period. We did our 5 years together. Kate Haggerty, Julie Little, and myself. And the years we won were 2004, 2006, 2008. And our numbers were 4, 6, and 8. I was number 4 or number 6. And so after we got that tattooed on our foot. So that's something that if you ever see somebody with a 4, 6, 8 tattoo, it's probably myself, Julie, or Kate. And it's just an illustration of that bond. Like we still are connected and keep in touch, and it's something that'll be with us forever. So that championships, absolutely. I went on and did my CA,
Hmm.
and my CBV, and I remember after I got my CA and I was told that I passed, one of the partners came up and said, "Oh, I bet this beats any basketball game you've ever played." And I said, "They're saying like not even close." But that is, yeah, but that is something I'm proud of too. And of course, I'm a mom of two kids now, 5-year-olds, Madeline and Thomas, who's 2. And that is a whole nother way you're tested being a parent, and it's a challenge, but I'm very proud of that as well.
So no, it's incredible. And not only giving back by raising kids well, but I know you're big into working in your community as well, with the alma mater as well. Why is that important to you and how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's important to me because I look back at my time as a student athlete, and the experience that I was given was exceptional. Like and it didn't come it came from the coaches, it came from the department, it came from the donor support, it came from so many different places, that now being an alumni, I'm so passionate about making sure that the future athletes are given that same exceptional experience as they go forward. And you mentioned, why Canada? And I want, Canada should be the destination of choice for Canadian athletes. It's a great, there's so much opportunity, and there are so many talented Canadian athletes. If we continue to better them and improve and work towards continuing to build the youth sport community, like I think there's no reason that this shouldn't be the first destination for top Canadian athletes.
Well, if you think back to when you started at UBC, and I know you talk to a lot of young athletes, but you think they're just thinking, I'm just trying to stay on the team and I'm trying to pay for tuition if I need to, or I don't even know where classes are, and everything feels big, and their world at the same time is so much smaller than graduation. What's your advice to those folks?
Yeah. And I remember being in that exact same feeling, right? Where it's, that is your world, and it's tough to imagine it outside. Like I think in hindsight, having that patience and that faith, like so many student athletes are in that situation where they feel like they have to figure everything out, right now.
Yeah.
And they've had this great path where, you had your high school, you excelled at your sport, and then you went on to university and competed for 4 or 5 years, and you knew you were there to get a degree, but you're also there on that path. And then when they both come to an end, that school and that sport, it can be a very a time of reflection, and it can be very unsettling. But
Yeah.
I think having that faith that you'll and that patience, and allowing yourself to really do that discovery on beyond sport, what excites you, what interests you. It's a good process, because when I started at UBC, I went into arts because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do HKIN or commerce. And I thought I would want to do HKIN because I love sports, and I just equivalated to, I love sports. Why wouldn't I build a career around it? But it turns out I did terrible at my HKIN pre courses, but I did amazing at my pre-con because I was good at math. And I just kind of followed that path of least resistance, and which ended up leading me down a career path that I would never have guessed. Like entering university, that I would go down that path, becoming an accountant, and now I work in finance. But I think it was just letting that play out, and going out, taking the courses that I was interested in, seeing where that led, meeting people, and embracing our donor community as well, because eventually that is what landed me my first job at Ernst & Young, and going from there.
Okay, final question, and this has nothing to do with it, but I'm just curious. I've interviewed a lot of professional athletes, and it always amazes me how much sleep they get every night. Everyone in the NHL sleeps like 1,000 hours a day. And I thought, I'm wondering your theories on sleep. And again, this has nothing to do with anything. I'm just curious. When you were an athlete and a student, that's a lot of hours. Now that you're a professional and a mom of young kids, what's your theory on sleep?
It's interesting. Because when I was an athlete and a student, I always had time for, like, I think I slept at 10 or 9 hours a night, and I probably still had a nap in the day, right? And I think about that now, that sounds crazy, because there's been times, and I know any young parent can relate with this, where I'd go to work the next day and I'd reflect back and be like, I think I might have got 3 hours of sleep in between I think, but here I am, and I'm going to go into this meeting and do my best. And yeah, you do it, right? You get
crazy.
through it. No, and I appreciate the conversation. One thing I'd be remiss with not sharing, and because it is probably my, something that I am very passionate about with UBC is, so, I'm chairing the Thunderbird Alumni Council, and a big reason for my involvement is the university's ambitious commitment to get to a place of gender equity with their scholarships and endowment. And that's something, I look at amateur athletes, and to put it in simple terms, it's, if my son was to get the free shoes for his soccer team, my daughter should too. And so expand that up to university. I really think between women and men's sports, like at that amateur level, the experience for a female basketball player and a men's basketball player should be the same, and they both should be exceptional. So like that whole movement around creating I co-lead a women in sports initiative at UBC, and we're trying to build that sense of community for our female alumni, with the intention of getting to that place where we have that community, we have that donor group, and can be in that place where we're funding, so that 10 years from now, we're at that level where it is, and hopefully faster. But I look at the time when my daughter is entering university, and who knows if she'll play sports, but it's you want that to be and of course a moment that you say, yeah, of course this is the way it should be, not something that we're fighting for. And I would, when I played, there was instances where you, as a female athlete, you say, oh, like, okay, the men's teams get 4 shoes and we get 2 pairs of shoes. It's like, oh, well, they're boys. Like, and you just took it at the time, staying there. And I think kudos to this next generation coming up, because they're asking questions that we didn't. And I'm so inspired by their commitment and also the students' commitment. Like at UBC, they have these festival games where they go very far in promoting different sports. And it was the student body that raised the fat, saying, well, why is the men's hockey team always getting the Winter Classic, the hockey festival game? We'd like to see the women's sports get that, right? And that was kind of came from the student body saying, it's time to change and we want to support both. So so I'm encouraged by that. It's a big passion area for me, and you'll continue to see me chip away at that over the next few years.
That's awesome. And it's so good. And as like you say, it's one of those where when I was younger, I didn't think of it, but it's so much smarter to think that way. And kudos to you for getting out there and getting that word out. I got to go out and get a tattoo, I'll get one that's 7, just to say, yes, I'm not quite them, but kind of. Erica, you're an inspiring person. Thank you so much for the time.